Hello guys and welcome back to the channel. Game week 13 is almost upon us, so let's go through who I think are the best teams and players to target going forward, my team selection plans and some of my potential transfers I might make before the Friday deadline. Let's get this video to 10 likes again, and before we get into game week 13, let's take a look at how game week 12 went. We finally got another green arrow after 4 weeks of red arrows in a row. I dropped from 176,000 to 1.8 million, but we're back in the right direction. And thank God I made the transfers I did, otherwise it could have been really bad. Starting with Raya, and Arsenal managed to keep their first clean sheet since game week 4. So a nice 6-pointer from him. Unfortunately, Man United couldn't keep a clean sheet against Ipswich, and Dallo only came out with 2 points. But he looked relatively positive going forward. I think we're still going to have to give Man United and the new manager time though. Lewis Hall obviously came in for Trent Alexander-Arnold this week. And of course Trent didn't actually play, so essentially it was a good transfer despite the fact that he only got 1 point and Newcastle lost 2-0 to West Ham. Despite the fact they lost though, I think it was a pretty positive performance by Hall. Wasn't exactly expecting a clean sheet from Wolves against Fulham, but Aït-Nouri didn't get any attacking returns either, so he ended up on 2. Even more annoyingly, Palmer ended on 2, and the only reason he ended on 2 is because Madueke cleared one of his shots off the line. Palmer's now blanked 3 games in a row, but I don't think this is an issue. If Madueke is not in the way there, we're talking about a 7-pointer minimum. Semenyo only got 1 point after managing to get himself booked in their 2-1 defeat against Brighton, which actually means he misses the next game. And surprisingly, Brentford drew 0-0 with Everton. Brentford have been scoring really freely this season, so it's quite a surprise that they didn't score in the game, which obviously means Mbeumo didn't get any returns and he ended up on 3. 4 out of 4 blanks so far in the midfield, with Rodgers only getting 2 as well. But, again, like I said, thank God for my transfers and the fact that I took Phil Foden out and put Mohamed Salah in, otherwise this week could have been a catastrophe. It didn't exactly all go to plan for Liverpool, but in the end, Salah ended up scoring 2 goals and they won 3-2. It could have been even more as well. After he scored one of his goals, he took his shirt off and got a yellow card. And he missed 2 big opportunities after that as well, which knocked him down to 2 bonus. Cunha has been absolutely brilliant for the past few weeks. In fact, all of the season. And he didn't stop against Fulham, scoring 2 goals and getting 1 assist, with 16 points altogether. Manchester City and Haaland's woes got even worse when they got absolutely battered by Tottenham 4-0, meaning now they've lost 5 games in a row. Technically, I'm recording this on Wednesday. They played in the Champions League on Tuesday, as I'm sure you all know, and drew 3-3, giving up a 3-0 lead. Haaland did score twice in that game, but I'm starting to think it's time to move away from him in FPL. But we'll talk about that and the options surrounding it later on in the video. First, I want to talk about some fixture swings this week, and that's mainly, or only, really, Arsenal. They've got their tougher fixtures in terms of Liverpool and Chelsea out of the way, and from game week 13, as you can see, they play West Ham, Man United, Fulham, Everton, Palace, Ipswich, Brentford and Brighton up to game week 20. They looked absolutely dominant in their win against Forest. And I think they're back to their best. They've also just absolutely dismantled Sporting Lisbon in the Champions League. For me, there's one man in the Arsenal team that should literally be a necessity in your FPL team, and that's Bukayo Saka. For me personally, that's the attacker I'd go for. And in an ideal world, I would triple up on Arsenal and I'd have Bukayo Saka and 2 defenders. One of them being Gabriel. The other one's a little bit up for debate. You could go Raya in goal, you could go Saliba to go with him, or you could possibly go for the likes of Timber as Ben White's out for an extended period of time. Now, On to probably the hottest topic of this game week, and that's what to do with Haaland if you've still got him. Is it time to move away from him? In reality, I think the best time to move away from him was weeks ago, but that's hindsight. But we do have to consider things from a for and against basis. Because although Man City have been terrible, Haaland's still been getting the XG. If you look at the data between game week 6 and 12, he's had an XG of 6.39, but he's only scored 2 goals. When you look at this in comparison to somebody like Mo Salah, he's had a very similar amount of XG, but he scored 69 points compared to Haaland's 21 between game weeks 6 and 12. And that's not even including any sort of captaincy. So if you realistically think about it, Haaland owners have been incredibly unlucky. And that swing in points is probably not deserved, but that's just the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. Another reason to move away from him is obviously his price. He's so expensive, and if you go without him, it just allows you to spread your budget across your squad so much more evenly. And with the cheaper assets at the moment, in terms of strikers, outscoring him, then I don't see why you wouldn't move away from him at this point. You've got the likes of Cunha and João Pedro, who are absolutely smashing it at the moment. The likes of João Pedro has played 89 minutes since he came back from injury, and he's got more points than Haaland has in 630 minutes between game week 6 and 12. But Cunha and Pedro aren't realistically the options to move from Haaland. Because of their price, you can just have them anyway. The strikers you'll be looking at to sort of move from Haaland are the likes of Isak, Watkins and Jackson, but we'll talk about those replacements a little bit later on in the video when I go through my best forwards. Firstly, I want to talk about who I think the best defenders are for this week and going forward. I've decided now to not use season data and decided to take the data from between game weeks 8 and game week 12. So we get a little bit more of an inkling on form. And that's why I've got Arsenal defenders quite high, Gabriel in number 1 and Timber in number 2. You can see that their clean sheet data and their goals conceded data is by far the best. Gvardiol's a strange one. I've still got him in 3 because if I had him, I wouldn't necessarily move away from him. He's still putting out really good attacking data. At the same time, he's not somebody I would look to bring in if I didn't have him. At the same price, I'd just go for Gabriel or Van Dijk. Speaking of Liverpool defenders, and I've actually taken Konate completely off the list because Liverpool have had their quote-unquote easy fixture against Southampton for the next couple of weeks, and he's actually on 4 yellow cards, which means he could serve a ban. With Man City next and Newcastle after that, I just wouldn't touch him until after he's served his ban, because it will happen eventually. I think 8 Nuri is still probably the best defender for under 5 million. Just because of the fixtures. It's a slightly weird one again because Wolves' fixtures have switched and become a hell of a lot easier. However, his attacking contribution has gone down. He was more attacking against the more difficult teams, and now they're more sturdy against the weaker teams. Players like Leif Davis and Digne are putting up really good attacking data as well, but I've left them off the list because obviously Leif Davis plays for Ipswich, who's a pretty weak defence, and Digne was not in the starting 11 in their last game. Another one to keep an eye on as well, because of Chelsea's fixtures, would be Malo Gusto. It's reported that Reece James is possibly out until 2025. What a surprise. That man is absolutely conning a living. In number 5, I've got Lewis Hall still. At 4.4, I still think he's great value, and they're playing Crystal Palace this week. As long as you can sub him in game week 14 when they play Liverpool, and you've got cover, I think you're absolutely golden. You can see in the data from game week 8 to 12, he's almost got an XG similar to Guardiola. And Newcastle's defence has been pretty sturdy, despite the fact they just lost 2-0 to West Ham, which was a bit of a surprise. I'm kind of hoping that's just a blip. Moving on to the midfielders, and I think the narrative has kind of changed slightly. Because so many people are going away from Haaland, I think you can spend a little bit more money in midfield now. Now, if you're going without Haaland, personally, I think 3 of your midfield spaces are locked already in Saka, Palmer and Salah. But there are 2 there that you don't have to necessarily have the cheapest players in the game. You may have a little bit more budget to upgrade from the likes of Smith Rowe, Semenyo or Rodgers. Not that I think some of those assets need to be transferred out, because I don't, but you do have the option. Now, I know we've spoken about the uncertainty around Man United and their new manager, but I still think that the best mid-price midfielder is Bruno Fernandes, and that's just because he creates so many opportunities. I'm sure Man United will click with this sort of attacking, free-flowing football that Amorim's brought in, and outside of the premiums, Bruno Fernandes has had the best big chance involvement data. He gets 2 big chances involvements per 90. Another reason to look at some of these players is Mbeumo. Now, he's been really good this season, but over the past few weeks, his data has just completely fallen off a cliff. They've got Leicester this week, but after that, Brentford's fixtures get really, really tough. So, any of these players on this list could be a really good replacement for Mbeumo. I've put Odegaard in because I still think he's a great option, despite the fact that you should 100% go with Saka if you can. Arsenal are so much better and more creative with Odegaard in the team, but maybe I'm being tricked into the eye test, because if you watch football, you'll know that Odegaard is kind of the guy that gets the assist of the assist. So he's not always the best FPL asset, but he's still up there. Matoma has absolutely flown up the list for me, and that's for multiple reasons. One, they're playing Southampton next, who I don't have to repeat myself in saying they're probably the worst team in the league. Sorry if I've got any Southampton fans listening. But even outside of Southampton, they've got a really nice fixture run coming up. The other reason is that, kind of outside of Danny Welbeck, he seems to be the main man for minutes. He plays 90 minutes or close to pretty much every game. I think there was one game against Newcastle where he played 30 minutes. Other than that, he's played all of them. And with a certain very creative striker we're going to talk about shortly back in the team, I think his chances are just going to go up and up. Brighton have been really good this season, and they could even be fighting for European places at the end, so I don't see why it would be an issue if you double up on their attack with Matoma and João Pedro. Next is somebody that I like to think of as Mr. Consistent in FPL. He seems to just chip away and get points after points after points, and that's Jarrod Bowen. Personally, I think Jarrod Bowen is probably the perfect replacement if you're looking to go out of Mbeumo, because you can keep Mbeumo for this week against Leicester and then move into Jarrod Bowen game week 14 when he's playing Leicester. I've put Kulusevski in number 5, and that might seem really odd to some people coming off a 4-0 win against Man City where Maddison got a double-digit haul. But Kulusevski is the one that Ange seems to be favouring at the moment. He's playing most of the minutes. The likes of Brennan Johnson and Maddison are getting all the plaudits in FPL. but I feel like people are slightly ignoring Kulusevski. And to be fair, Johnson and Maddison do have more points than him, but I'm just slightly concerned that their minutes won't be as much during the December run, and Kulusevski's just going to be in the team every week. I would keep an eye on Maddison though, see if he sort of nails down a permanent spot, playing lots of minutes, and then review, because I think if he's playing 90 minutes every game, he's probably a better option than Kulusevski. And now we're talking about the forwards. This is a big topic this week, guys, because of Haaland. But first of all, I'm going to talk about the cheaper assets that have been absolutely on fire. And that is Cunha at number 1. Wolves still have an absolutely great fixture run. And I think Cunha is probably the must-have striker. He's got 2 double-digit hauls, despite his data not actually looking that great. But if you watch him play, he's just by far Wolves' best player. In number 2, and the only reason he's number 2 is because he doesn't play 90 minutes every game, is João Pedro. I think João Pedro is the best asset in the game at 5.6 million. And I'm telling you now, even if it's going to cost you minus 4 points, this is the easiest transfer you will ever make. If you've got Raul Jimenez, take him out and put Pedro in. As I said, probably the biggest question of this week is what to do with Haaland. And these 3, I think, are the best options if you're moving away from him. And that's Isak, Watkins and Jackson. Now, I don't personally think there's one huge standout. Nicholas Jackson probably has the best fixture run and he's the cheapest. But he also has the worst data of the 3 and he's on 4 yellow cards. So if you put him in this week, targeting the Southampton game, and he gets a yellow card against Aston Villa, you're going to be pretty pissed off. Watkins is the more expensive option at 9 million. And if you can stretch that extra million from Jackson or the extra 0.5 million from Isak, he's a great option. He's also one that has been improving pretty much all season. He kind of started off really slowly, but his data now is getting really good. Isak, for me, is probably the best option. He has the best data, and I wouldn't look too much into his blank against West Ham. I mean, he scored a goal that was literally a toenail offside, and he had a few good opportunities. The only thing that slightly concerns me about Isak is the fact that in the West Ham game, we saw that Callum Wilson's back. Now, he didn't come off for Callum Wilson, but when Callum Wilson came on, he obviously went up top as the main striker, and Isak went out to the right. I still think Isak is the number 1 striker at Newcastle, but Wilson will be getting minutes. Overall, though, like I said, I think he's the best option for a Haaland replacement. Now I've sort of covered who I think the best options are, let's have a look at my Game Week 13 plans. This is what the team for Game Week 13 would have looked like, ideally with no transfers. But Semenyo has kind of put a spanner in the works with that because of his 5 yellow cards and his suspension. So if I don't make any transfers this week, my team is going to look like this. Now, ideally, I don't want to be playing 4 at the back any game week this season because obviously the attackers are just so much more threatening. And there's no obvious captain choice in this team. I mean, you could argue that the way Man City are playing, Mo Salah is an obvious captain choice, but historically that's a difficult game. Palmer's playing Villa, which is a difficult game, and Haaland's playing Liverpool, which in their state is a difficult game. Again, in an ideal world, I would just take out Stewart and put João Pedro in, but I'm 0.1 off that, annoyingly, so I'm probably going to have to take a hit. And with my hit, I would make 2 transfers. I would probably take Semenyo out now and put Saka in, and take Haaland out and put Isak in. This gives me a much better captain option in Saka against West Ham, although, like I said, I'm still heavily considering playing Mo Salah as the captain. We'll be back to 3 at the back, with Raya playing West Ham, Dalot playing Everton, Hall playing Crystal Palace, and Ait-Nouri playing Bournemouth. Palmer at home against Villa, Saka away at West Ham, and Mbeumo at home against Leicester, Rodgers away at Chelsea, and Salah at home against Man City in the midfield. And then up top, Isak, Crystal Palace away, and Cunha, Bournemouth at home. One other thing that's sort of playing on my mind is João Pedro, and that Brighton are playing Southampton. So I could even take a -8, taking Stewart out, putting João Pedro in, and then putting Rodgers on the bench and playing a 3-4-3 with Isak, Pedro and Cunha up top. But Brighton are playing Friday, so maybe if I hear that he's starting, I might do it right on the deadline. Anyway guys, that's it for another week. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe to the channel for more FPL content throughout the season. Check out some of my other videos and go and take a look at my new TikTok account under the same name, FPL Pinnacle, for more short form content. Wishing you good luck for the upcoming game week, and I'll see you in the next one.